Russian President Vladimir Putin makes a diplomatic visit to Kursk, rallying troops and pushing for swift victories. Remember, Kursk is inside Russia. On the other hand, American President Donald Trump delivers an ultimatum. Peace is now Russia's choice. Our next report brings you the latest from the battlefield and the diplomatic tug of war between Washington and Moscow.
Ukraine is under relentless assault. Russian missiles and drones pound Ukrainian cities, while Ukraine retaliates with its own drone strikes. The war has reached a new level of intensity. President Vladimir Putin, donning military fatigues, made a surprise visit to troops in Russia's western Kursk region. He ordered them to press their lightning advance and swiftly retake the remaining area from Ukrainian forces.
To completely liberate the territory of the Kursk region, to restore the situation along the state borderline. And of course, we need to think, I would ask you to think in the future about creating a security zone along the state border. We need to think about this too.
Putin's rare visit to the front line carries significant symbolic weight, as Russian forces have also crossed into Ukraine's Sumy region, pushing back Ukrainian troops. On the battlefield, Ukraine faces catastrophe. In Kursk, over 30,000 Ukrainian troops are now cut off, trapped without supplies. Russia has reclaimed 24 strategic settlements in just 5 days in its border region. Russian forces are cutting through Ukrainian lines with superior firepower, drone warfare, and reportedly North Korea-backed infantry units. Kursk, once a hard-fought gain for Ukraine, is nearly lost. Supplies of arms from the US to Ukraine have resumed, bolstered by American backing. Kyiv once again launched a drone attack on Russian territory. Russia says it downed 77 Ukrainian drones 2 days after Kyiv carried out its largest direct strike on Moscow during the 3-year war. Washington says it would soon be sending a 30-day ceasefire proposal to Moscow, which was agreed by Kyiv in a closed-door meeting in Saudi Arabia. Trump warns that if Moscow refuses, there will be devastating consequences.
There are things you could do that wouldn't be pleasant in a financial sense. I can do things financially that would be very bad for Russia. I don't want to do that because I want to get peace. I want to see peace, and we'll see. But in a financial sense, yeah, we could do things very bad for Russia. It would be devastating for Russia, but I don't want to do that because I want to see peace.
As the world waits to hear if Russia accepts the terms of the US-brokered ceasefire, Ukraine's bargaining chip in Kursk appears poised to disappear altogether. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Maximilian Hess, Central Asia Fellow at a Foreign Policy Research Institute, joins us now from London. Welcome to WION. What could be Vladimir Putin's next move at this point?
Well, personally, thank you so much for having me. Vladimir Putin is interested in drawing out these negotiations and using them to stoke tensions, both between the United States and Ukraine and between the United States and its broader Euro-Atlantic allies in the United Kingdom and in the European Union. So they will likely signal that they're open to some kind of talks, but Putin will not be serious about them.
And if Putin is not ultimately serious, what can President Trump do at that point?
Well, there are a number of things President Trump can do. As you played in the clip just now, there are still areas of sanctions pressure that the West could increase on Russia. There could be additional sanctions on Russian oil. Some of these would affect other sensitive relationships, including in India. For example, there could be a sanctioning of the Vadinar refinery, which is a key source of hard currency for Russia's state oil company, Rosneft, and in turn the Russian budget. There could be additional sanctions on Russian gas and LNG projects. that Putin is hoping to develop. And there could be additional secondary sanctions threats against others willing to allow their financial systems to be used by Russian entities, particularly in this case, China and Hong Kong. Now, whether Donald Trump is willing to do so or not is another question. And finally, I would also state he could, of course, significantly increase the level of arms flowing to Ukraine with congressional support.
And my final question is about the U.S. team that's in Moscow for Ukraine talks. You know, Steve Witkoff is leading these negotiations. He's going to be speaking with the Russians inside Russia, but this comes at a time when Russia has retaken Kursk region, according to reports. So where does this delegation stand? And at least in the short term, what do we expect?
So Russia has certainly made advances in the Kursk region. The exact lines of control remain unclear, but the Ukrainians have signaled that they have withdrawn quite significantly past the border town of Sudza, and so they're likely holding only a small area, about 20% at most of what they held initially after the August counteroffensive there. Steve Witkoff in the story on the Trump administration is particularly interesting. One senior Kremlin advisor this morning said that Steve Witkoff would not be the one leading the negotiations with the Russians, although he's had some success, or at least measured success, in terms of getting U.S. nationals detained and in Russia released, although they're, of course, only held as hostages for exactly this purpose. Within the Trump team, there are a lot of very large personalities and people with very stark disagreements on this. You have people who are traditionally rather hawkish on Russia, such as Marco Rubio, who had repeatedly called on the Biden administration to do more to counter the Kremlin. And then you have others like J.D. Vance, who are frankly lickspittle and willing to bend over in front of Russia's desires. So this is really a question of personnel management within the Trump administration. And these, there's, of course, an idea of a cabinet of rivals. This is something U.S. presidents have done many times before. But we saw essentially in Trump's first administration that particularly in the early months, there were too many chefs in the kitchen and they started burning each other. And there's certainly indications that there may be a similar dynamic at play in the second Trump administration as well, in particular on this issue.
Thank you so much for all of that insight. Maximilian Hess, do come back on WION. Thanks.
Thank you for having me. Bye.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.